A lot of people don't have time for a dog or cat, so they want to get their first aquarium because they think fish are easier, right? Keep watching as I share my top 5 life hacks for saving you time, money, and heartache when it comes to fish keeping. Hi, I'm Irene with Girl Talks Fish, and recently a lot of my friends have come to me asking for help setting up their first aquarium. And usually their first questions to me are, what's the smallest tank I can get, and what is the least amount of money that I can spend? And so we have to remember that typically, I know fish are thought of as disposable pets because they're so cheap. Versus if you get a dog, you wouldn't typically find a new dog owner asking, well, what's the least amount of time, money, and space I can give this thing, right? Usually the thought is, well, what is the best home I can give this dog with the resources I have? So in the same way, if you don't feel like you have the time or money to spend on a living animal, even if it's a fish, I would highly recommend getting houseplants. I'm totally being serious. They're very, very beautiful, living things as well, and they require a lot less care. However, if you are interested in not just keeping fish alive, but also keeping them happy and healthy, here are the top tips and tricks that I wish somebody had told me when I was first getting into the hobby. Now, my first piece of advice is to get your first fish from a big chain store like PetSmart or Petco. They usually have a longer refund policy, and then they sell the cheapest, hardiest, most colorful fish that are really great for beginners. Like if you go down the rabbit hole of research and find a really cool exotic species you like, just remember they're exotic and rare for a reason and a lot less forgiving of beginner mistakes. Personally, I usually recommend to my friends to get like a single betta fish, or if you really want a tank full of fish, maybe try glowfish. I'm serious, I had a friend who had a 10-gallon tank with some glowfish in it, and these things were bulletproof. Out of all the fish she had in that tank, they just would not die. Now, if you have kids and you want some kind of fish to easily breed, consider getting platies rather than like the more common guppies. They just seem a lot hardier compared to other live bearers, which are fish that give birth to live young, and they come in all sorts of colors. A lot of fun. Tip number 2 is to get a heater and filter. I don't know why a lot of people balk at this, but it's like saying that you want to get a cell phone, but you want the cheapest, simplest one possible. So no texting, no taking pictures or listening to music, nothing. So yeah, it technically works, but in my opinion, your options and your enjoyment are a lot less limited. So basically all of those really colorful fun fish that I said you could get at Petco and PetSmart, they almost all need a heater. So without a heater, no betta fish, no neon tetras, no guppies. I actually had a friend who her husband tried to keep a couple of guppies in a 2-gallon tank with no heater, and yeah, in an air-conditioned house, they didn't last very long. Now, if you're really adamant about not wanting a heater, here is a list of some cool water or cold water fish that you can keep, but again, your options are pretty limited and some of them are going to be kind of hard to find. As for whether or not you need a filter, if you're a beginner, absolutely yes. I would say filters are like trash cans. So yes, you could have a house technically with no trash can, but you'd pretty much have stuff, junk, just scattered all over the place. So in the same way, if you want to keep your aquarium nice and clean, use a filter because it will basically collect a lot of that fish poop and excess detritus that's floating around in the tank. Nobody wants to see that stuff. Speaking of fish waste, tip number 3 is reduce your poop load. So aquariums are kind of like litter boxes. Both of them are areas that collect a lot of animal waste, right? So if you're like me without a lot of time and money, what are some ways we can minimize the number of times we have to change the litter box or clean the aquarium? So one way of doing that is to get a bigger litter box, or in your case, a bigger aquarium, right? If you have a tiny litter box, you're gonna have to clean that thing out every single day. And same thing with a tiny tank. If you don't clean it out every day, your fish could potentially die from living in their own waste, right? Versus if you have a larger litter box or aquarium, you could maybe change it once a week, once every few weeks, right? Some of the most common sizes I see for beginners are 5, 10, or 20 gallons. So again, lean on toward the bigger aquarium sizes like 10 or 20 gallons. Another way would be to not get as many fish. So a litter box for 5 cats is going to need to be cleaned out a lot more often than if you have a litter box for just 1 cat, right? So in the same way, for a beginner setting up their first tank, it's going to look like you have a lot of decorations or plants and very, very few fish. Think of it like in nature. You have a forest, there's tons and tons of trees, and very few deer, right? Because we don't want a forest full of deer poop. Finally, I would recommend that beginners just get in the habit of cleaning your tank once a week, kind of like your Saturday morning routine, right? It's similar to mowing your lawn every 1 or 2 weeks, right? It's gonna be a lot easier versus if you do it once a month where all the grass is overgrown, you're gonna have to get that weed whacker out, it's covered in dog waste, like it's just disgusting, right? So go ahead and just do those small water changes every week, and then make sure you use a siphon. So it's basically like this tube connected to a long hose, and it acts like a vacuum where you can use it to suck up all of the fish waste and detritus at the bottom of the tank. Very, very easy. I'll link a tutorial over here on how to use it. Okay, this next tip is really short and sweet, but if you want to keep your aquarium looking clean with minimal effort, avoid algae growth. The easy ways you can do that is don't put your aquarium in a location that gets direct sunlight, and then B, minimize the amount of light it gets. I basically, in my first aquarium that didn't have any plants in it, I treated it like a room light. If I was in the room, standing in front of the aquarium, I would turn on the aquarium light, and as soon as I left the aquarium, I would turn it off. It basically saves you electricity as well as a lot of time and effort cleaning off the algae. For most beginners, I usually recommend that they start with trying to keep fish alive before they attempt the next level of trying to keep plants alive. But if you're really interested in these beautiful greenery in your tank, you can try easy plants like Java moss and Java fern. Tip number 5 is don't get a lot of tanks. I know you're really, really excited. Start off with one. Don't get into multiple tank syndrome yet, because the fewer tanks you have, the more time and energy you can spend on each individual one, making it look good, making sure the parameters are correct, making sure that the fish are healthy. You know, some families, they really like big families with 10 kids, right? Versus me, I like 2 kids and I like my 2 aquariums where I spend a lot of time looking at those fish. You know, at one point I had albino Cory catfish, and yes, I named each one, giving it like one of the names of the Avengers, right? So that's just my personal opinion, but I just don't want you to get overwhelmed too quickly. If you're looking for a really easy fish to take care of, I always recommend bedded fish to my first-time fish keeping friends. Here is a short 3-minute tutorial over here, as well as my other fish keeping tutorials. Also, huge thanks to Lynette for becoming my latest supporter. I can't wait to see more of you on the Patreon community. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.